Copter cover-ups for October 6th. So I didn't become aware of the military copter turn as the only point of proof for the military copter threats that I received daily until they flew a military copter backwards against the original line where he turned out of my frame and made a dramatic, unique movement there and made a left turn. And so I knew something was up because it was very conspicuous, and then I figured it out. And that was a recent date. I'm recording this on October 31st. So some of these things, now that I'm reviewing them from a later date, make more sense. So the police copter came right to left in the copter pocket across the street, if you're looking across the street, and he made a right circle behind 24191, and then he made a left, and he went toward Geronimo Montia intersection, and then he waved, and then he descended dramatically. And so this is part of the stuff I was talking about. Only on the 30th and the 31st has he started to combine things a little more methodically instead of compartmentalizing everything. And I thought for a long time that that's just all that's required in court because it looks stupid and it's not natural. So if anyone actually of authority or auditing saw it, they'd be like, get out of here. But that's not how it is. And so he did these all compartmentalized too. He waved and then he descended really dramatically. And so I didn't know that he was descending to say that, oh, there's this terrible hill there. But there isn't. If people just come out and measure the grade, it's embarrassing. And so, and this happened shortly after a supposed civilian copter did a circle there too. And so those are two separate situations, two separate supposed groups of people that would do that. So it doesn't make any sense. And so he did the circle shortly after the UN copter cover-up did the circle in the same spot, which is conflicting. And then at 11:05, he went left to right. If you're looking down the street towards Deseo Solero intersection, he crossed over left to right and went over 24092 and near the Solero Deseo intersection, kind of in between. And that is good enough to cover up for the power circles on 24092 because their argument, which I guess is working, is that if you pass over a problem spot, and you put it on your regular routine line, then you're allowed to account for like an hour of power circles at 50 feet of altitude because it's on your line. And so at 11:08, he then went left to right in the park. So if you're looking out at the park, I call this going down the park. So from Montevideo Elementary School down the curvature of the park towards Geronimo. And so he did that, but he went low behind the trees. And so that's like 100 feet maximum and probably less because he was really hard to see, just the top, sometimes between the houses. And then at 9:59 p.m., he was in the park and he was going up the park and he was going really slow with red flashing lights. And then he cut out of the park and went slow over 24092. So if people make a map and look at his routine, all his routine is a circle that hits all the spots he needs. And then they make it even smaller. So basically it started with the 24092 as the damming event. And so that's why the surveillance route started, because we played cat and mouse and I'd be at the top of the ice blocking hill of the park and we would have a face-off, and I would have to stagger back all the way up to my house and try to get down to 24092, and they had fun. They thought it was great, and that's why they would go out around the neighborhood towards Tribuco Marguerite and then come back up over 24092. And so when he got there then, after going up the park, he sat on it like James Crystal, like it's mine, and he was so pleased with himself that he got there and he was doing his stuff. And so then he did left circles on that, and then at 10:04, he was flying down the houses on the opposite side of the street. So he did left circles there for 4 minutes, and then he continued out of it, and he did left circles. Then he continued left on the houses on the opposite side of the street, coming towards me from 24092, towards my house. And then he made a right, and he went back towards Fall to Caladad, and then did right circles. So he didn't come all the way down to the two-story house. But part of this has to do with returning. And so then he... basically, it was like an opposite of the 11 p.m. line, because instead of doing circles and then darting back, he darted and then did circles there. And so some of these things, that's why I want to be able to explain everything properly to everyone. If you look at all the parts compartmentalized, they put certain parts in places that they should not be because it doesn't make sense. Just like when they do the compartmentalized, just the movements alone, not the movements alone of the helicopter itself. I'm not talking about around the area. I'm talking about his actual movements. When they're compartmentalized, it's telling, because then he'll do a wave, and then he'll do a pump, and then he'll do a descent, and then he'll do a circle. And so it all looks wrong, and it's like, oh, well, we're just doing this to do this because we need to legally. And that's what I thought, but now they've changed it on the 30th and 31st to be a little bit more methodical, but they haven't changed a lot of their cover-ups. But I also did notice that on, I think, the 28th, 27th, that I said that it looks like they've brought in maybe someone else to start organizing things. Then I realized that they hadn't. Maybe they all just started rubbing their heads together a little more because they tried to start being more methodical about the movements as well. So the movements started to become, the overall movement around the neighborhood started to become a little bit more methodical. And then recently they started to become more methodical with the compartmentalization of the actual movements of the helicopter. But if you look through all these, once I explain it, and I'm going to do an overview later on with the damming parts, and then I'm going to show the damming parts in each part of everything and how it's all the same stuff, because they'll do it backwards, and sometimes it doesn't make sense to do it backwards. And also they do it with a situation like a police fake call, and then they also do it for a routine time, and then they do it backwards, and it doesn't make sense.